just wanted to let you, yes, so this meeting will be recorded and MAPC may choose to retain and distribute the video. We actually do plan to share the recording on our website, and as a public agency, this also becomes public record. If you do not feel comfortable being recorded, you can please turn off your camera or mute your microphone or leave the meeting. And just a bit of Zoom housekeeping before we get started. If you could please keep yourself on mute when not talking and use the chat feature to ask questions. We'll be having a Q&A section after the presentations from Department of Energy Resources. So we'll have a chance for folks to put in the chat questions that they may have, but please do use that chat feature. And then if you can go up to the 3 little dots in your Zoom profile to rename yourself, make sure that you have your name and ideally also your organization as well. And just before we jump into the content of today's presentation, we thought it would be good to do an introductory poll. We have over 100 of you on this webinar today, so we're just curious to get to know you a little bit. So Francelis is going to launch our 2 poll questions. So the first question is, what is your role? Please choose the one that best describes. Are you planning staff, ISD, municipal staff, zoning or planning board member, municipal committee, elected official, nonprofit, state agency, or other? And then the second question is, how familiar are you with building and energy codes? So completely new to the building and energy codes, some familiarity, comfortable, very familiar, some expertise, or expert. So we'll give folks a few minutes to answer the participant polls. Great, I think most folks have answered. So this is great. We have a lot of planning staff and other municipal staff on, as well as committee members, and then a few from nonprofits and other state agencies, and then a couple folks from inspectional services. So welcome, a wide diversity of audience members. And then it looks like the majority of folks have some familiarity with the building and energy codes, and then a few folks that are very comfortable or even experts, and then a few that are also completely new to building codes, and this might be your first webinar or first time engaging with them. So that's great. Let me close this poll back down. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie Curdy to get us started. Julie Curdy is our Clean Energy Director here at MAPC. She leads our Clean Energy Department in both climate mitigation and adaptation planning, and supports communities across the region in climate mitigation, clean energy, and adaptation work. So thank you, Julie.
Great, thanks so much, Sasha, and hi everybody, welcome and thank you for being here today. We really appreciate your time. As Sasha said, my name is Julie Curdy and I direct our Clean Energy team at MAPC. MAPC, or the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, is the regional planning agency, and we serve 101 cities and towns in and around Greater Boston. And specifically within MAPC, our clean energy team includes 7 full-time staff, and we work with municipalities, community partners, and other groups to rapidly drive down greenhouse gas emissions, build community resilience, and support a just clean energy transition. So we're really excited to be here with you today and welcome the Department of Energy Resources. They're going to share updates about the Stretch and Specialized Code that came into into place in January. We'll hear presentations today from Joanne Becerra and Paul Ormond, and then we'll have time for question and answer afterwards. As Joanne and Paul present, please feel free to add your questions as they come up into the chat. We'll gather those up and answer as many as we can during the Q&A that follow the presentation. And we ask that folks please keep themselves on mute during the presentation so we don't get any feedback noise. So to introduce our speakers today, Joanne Becerra is the Director of Green Communities at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, or DOER. She started at DOER in 2009 as a regional coordinator, and she worked directly with municipal officials and volunteers on green communities designations and clean energy projects. She was named the Deputy Director in 2016 and now directs the team and has over 2 decades of local and state government experience. Our second speaker today, Paul Ormond, is an engineer at the Department of Energy Resources. He's waving to everybody right now. And he works in building energy efficiency codes. Paul is an expert in building sciences and decarbonization, including commercial building codes, and he led the development of the commercial stretch and specialized code that he'll present on today. So we're very excited to have them here to share their expertise and to answer questions and provide an overview of the updated stretch code and the new opt-in specialized code. So I will turn it over to Joanne. Thank you.
All right, can you see my presentation? Is it in slideshow mode or regular mode?
Regular mode currently.
All right. There we go. Very good. So thank you, Julie, and the rest of the MAPC team. As they mentioned, I'm Joanne Becerra, and I'm very pleased to present to you some updates on the stretch and specialized code. And with my partner in crime, Paul Ormond, we hope to provide information and answer any questions that you have. So we're going to talk a bit about building code in general. There are 3 different kinds: base, stretch, and specialized. And we'll go through quickly a stretch code and building code 101 based on some of the folks that are here, just to level the playing field a little bit in terms of code familiarity, and then go through some of the specific changes that happened as of January 1 and then ones that are coming up. Okay, so first of all, why is the Department of Energy Resources concerned about building code? There's a number of reasons. The main one has to do with climate and clean energy policy that Massachusetts has developed over time. The most recent significant legislation was the climate bill passed in 2021 that basically mandated greenhouse gas emission reductions by 50% by 2030, 75% by 2040, and 0 by 2050. And these are based on 1990 levels. So we have a lot of work to do. And in terms of clean energy and climate policy, we're looking at 4 key pillars. And what we're talking about today, and what most of my team is addressing, is energy efficiency. Let's try to reduce the amount of emissions that we use in our buildings and our fleets by decarbonizing and electrifying and making it as clean as possible. So therefore, we care about building heat. This is a great slide that Paul put together a little while ago, but I still use it in a lot of my presentations, that as of today, heating a building with a heat pump is almost, has emissions that are over almost less than what gas has. And then if you think about the grid in 2050, when all the offshore wind comes online and all the other clean energy comes online, it's going to be significantly less. So this is why the Department of Energy cares about building code and how we heat our buildings. Another fun fact is that by 2050, 27% of our buildings will be new. They'll be built from today to 2050. So as many of us know, it's easiest and cheaper to build efficient, net zero buildings at the outset versus retrofitting and renovating. So we're really trying to drive down the energy use by new construction, and hence having building codes that reflect that. So, you know, we've been doing this for a while. DOER has been involved with energy efficient building codes since the Green Communities Act was passed in 2008. Again, really highlighting efficiency and, oops, sorry about that. Efficiency and minimizing peak demand. Also planning for future infrastructure needs by having EV ready and solar ready components in the building code, and all electric pre-wiring in the specialized code. So when the occupants of these buildings are ready to get their EV, they can charge it at their house or have the wiring ready to install the charging station. And then, you know, finally, because of Massachusetts being a home rule type of state, communities can choose to adopt these codes on their own timeline. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we have 3 different codes. We have the base code, which is part of the Massachusetts Building Code. Stretch code, which most communities in Massachusetts actually follow, and then the specialized code, which is the new code that was part of the new Climate Act. So with the base code, this is actually going to be updated very soon, and it's going to have an effective date this time next year. So a little bit about the stretch code. Again, these are things that we hear, you know, throughout the years and continue to do so, is, you know, it's this new and expensive and experiential type of code. No, it's been around for a while. It requires tight and unsafe homes. It requires solar, and it requires residents to update their homes immediately, whether or not they're doing any renovations. So those are all misconceptions and misinformation. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, these will all be cleared up if you had any questions. The stretch code basically applies to things that the regular building code apply to, you know, things that are part of new construction, insulation, windows, mechanical equipment, etc. It's really touches the same thing that the base code does. But what the difference is that it, instead of having a prescriptive list of items and efficiencies to check off as construction is going on, it tests performance, because you can design a really good building with high, you know, insulation rates, you know, good windows, but if it's not installed correctly, you know, it doesn't quite work. So I just love this infrared picture that shows, if you could see the green line over the front door and then the vertical lines near the windows, that shows where insulation isn't being effective. So you really want to have buildings that perform well. And how do we determine that? Those of you that have started working in this space might have heard about HERS rating. And it's like, what is a HERS rating? It's essentially a miles per gallon rating for your home. It's an acronym for a home energy rating system. And it's been around a while. It's been part of the IECC, or International Energy Conservation Code. You may hear that more as we go on. And it's based, the HERS 100 is based on the average home that was built in 2006. And the good news is as of 2021, the average new home had a HERS rating of 51. So a HERS 51 means that it's 49 more efficient than the average home of 2006. I live in a 100-year-old home with some windows that have been replaced, but not all. So my home might be at 120 or 130, just in terms of perspective. And the HERS process, this is a professional that a builder will employ to help them with the design, inspection, and verification of their building. analogous to a Title V inspector or a Title V installer that a builder might hire to design and construct a septic system. So it's somebody that works with the builder to help design the building, and through computer modeling, there's a preliminary HERS score. And as construction is going on, they'll conduct an inspection to make sure the insulation is installed right. And then finally, they'll conduct a blower door test, which that picture shows there, which determines how leaky or not leaky the house is. And based on those results, a final HERS certificate will be issued and provided to the local code official. So that's the process for the vast majority of residential stretch code buildings. So we've been at this for a while, and you could see the evolution here of HERS ratings, maximum HERS ratings allowed in Massachusetts Energy Code. We've had a bit of a hiatus since 2017, where the HERS ratings were 55 through various renditions of the building code. The codes are starting to change January 1st of this year, and they're going to continue to change next year. So you can see how the codes are going down a little bit. We'll talk more about that in a second. So again, here's color coded. The base code is gray. So the BBRS, which is the Board of Building Regulation and Standards, they're the in charge of, if you will, of all building codes, as well as the Energy Conservation Code portion of the base building code. They're going through the public comment process, and we anticipate the next base code to be voted on in the next few months, and there'll be a concurrency period for this is going to be the 10th edition of the building code. And then we expect that as of January 1st of 2024, the 10th edition will be effective. And again, builders building to the base code can choose a prescriptive path. That's the checklist of, the efficiencies of appliances and lighting and insulation. Or they do have the option of doing a HERS test as well, a HERS rating for base energy code buildings. And those would be the equivalent of HERS 52 for a home heated with fossil fuels, 55 for an all-electric home, and 58 for a home that is both electric and has solar PV. Okay, so that's base code. That's 51 communities right now are under the base code. The stretch code, we have 300 communities under the jurisdiction of the stretch code. Starting 6 weeks ago, the residential HERS changed from 55 to 52, 58, and 52, 55, and 58. And 52, again, is for the fossil fuel fired homes, 55 for all electric, and 58 for electric plus solar. And these are, they're called low-rise residential, so anything under 4 stories. And it looks like we have the wrong signal there for 4 stories. So this would be small multifamilies, townhouses, that type of thing, as well as 1 and 2 family homes. Starting in July, the stretch code for the commercial sector will become effective. And then in July of 2024, the HERS levels will be going down. Okay, so this is, again, 300 communities are under this code. Then we have the specialized code, which is our green code here. And this, again, was part of the climate legislation that was recently passed. And this requires a vote, an opt-in. We've had 4 communities already vote on it. And we highly encourage a 6-month phase-in period to let builders and designers in the community know that this code is coming. So these 3 out of the 4 communities, I believe, have an effective date of this July. The 4th one, I think, postponed it till next January. So any community that is contemplating voting on this at their Springtown meeting, the earliest we recommend it be effective is January 1st. And the main difference is it accelerates the maximum HERS ratings of 42 and 45. That will be part of the stretch code in July of 2024, but it just makes it effective sooner. Okay, here's our map. So the base code communities are white or cream colored, I guess. The stretch code are the light blue ones, and our specialized codes are the darker blue ones, and that would be the cities of Cambridge and Somerville, as well as Brookline and Watertown. They all had adopted the specialized code. All right, let's dig in a little bit on the stretch code. Again, this is the regular stretch code. How it's different from the base code. As I mentioned, there are some similarities. There's solar ready applies to residential code as well as the EV ready wiring. But what's different is it does require the HERS rating or a passive house, whereas the base code again is prescriptive, or they can also follow the Energy Star for Homes program, which is another type of tool that builders use. Also new is large additions and extensive alterations or renovations now apply to the stretch code, whereas previously they didn't. Here's a chart of the max HERS ratings for new construction. And again, January 1st of this year, they became 52 and 55 based on how your home is heated. And then July 1st of 2024, they go to HERS 42 and HERS 45. And then here's a chart for renovation, large additions and renovations. And just want to note that most home additions and alterations will not trigger these HERS ratings. These are significant changes to homes. So in terms of the stretch code, if you're already one of the 300 communities that are a stretch code, these are some of the key changes that happened on January 1st. The HERS ratings were lowered. Energy Star 3.1 is no longer an option under the stretch code. It's still allowed under the base code, but not the stretch code. Heat or energy recovery is now required, and the EV ready wiring is now required. And again, adding the compliance for new additions and extensive renovations. So this is kind of a busy slide, but essentially in communities that are current stretch code and looking towards the future, the HERS 42 and HERS 45 is not that far away. So, in terms of builders, looking to prepare, what our consultants have found is that it's generally cheaper to build electric homes, and Mass Save has very generous incentives and rebates available for homes that reach HERS 45 or lower. And here's some of that information. So if you build a really efficient home under passive house at HERS 35, you could get an incentive of $25,000. HERS 45, it's $15,000. And then there's also the tax credits available through the Inflation Reduction Act. And here's a quick cost estimate of our sample home. We chose a 4,000 square foot single family home with 5 bedrooms in Worcester. We have about at least half a dozen scenarios on our website that highlight all this. I just chose a couple just to highlight what the modeling has found. Generally, on the builder's perspective, it costs about $20,000 less to build this home heated with a heat pump under stretch code at 42 than it is at base code at 52. That's primarily through the tax rebates and incentives, but also it generally costs less to build a house that you only need one HVAC system. You don't need a heating system as well as an air conditioning system. You have one, so that's less expensive to build. And then if you look at the home buyer perspective, hopefully the builder will pass these cost savings on to reduce the price of the home. There'll be a smaller down payment, smaller mortgage payment. The energy costs under a stretch code will be slightly higher annually than under the base code, but at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, the homeowner still nets savings under this. And here's a similar scenario under a home heated by gas. Again, it's the same size home, base code of 52, stretch code of 42. It costs the builder more to build under this scenario. But if you follow the chart, you can see at the end, the buyer does have a smaller annual payment from energy savings. So we have these for multiple size homes, townhomes, multifamily, et cetera. So make sure you take a look on our website for these resources. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Paul.
Hey, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Why don't you go to the next slide, Joanne? Thanks, everyone, for joining, by the way. I really appreciate it. So I'm Paul. I work in the commercial side of things here at the DOER. So in a kind of quick wrap up of where things are relative base code versus stretch code. So both base code and stretch code mandate EV ready wiring, solar readiness for buildings that are 4 stories or less, and air leakage testing, which is now becoming mandatory for commercial buildings all across the nation in the IECC model code. Where Massachusetts differs from the model code that's embodied in our stretch code now is that these green items at the bottom, we now have mandatory balanced ventilation. So, you know, it used to be that you ventilated through the walls with air leakage, and now that we have good walls, we can't do that anymore. So we put ventilation systems in, and that has to be ventilated throughout all the rooms, not just a bathroom, for example. We have also new pathways for what we call TEDI compliance. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Go to the next slide. So in the big picture, the way stretch code for commercial projects is changing, and I just want to highlight this is for buildings that are, you know, larger commercial buildings. So this is someone building a large multifamily in your town. This isn't you know, your single family home or even a townhome type of situation. This is someone building a warehouse, large multifamily projects, or a commercial office building, things of that nature. In the current stretch code, we use an approach that is based on showing that you have a relative % improvement on a total site energy reduction basis. We're replacing that framework with one that more directly regulates the heating and cooling demand reductions. So again, instead of showing that your overall building use is reduced by a certain percentage below some baseline, what you need to show with commercial construction is that your heating and cooling demands are below certain thresholds. And we'll explain why that priority has changed. Another big change from our current stretch code is that we currently actually, even if you're in a stretch code town, if your building's under 100,000 square feet, the rules for stretch code don't apply to that building. So that goes away, and the new stretch code applies to buildings of all sizes. And further, the current stretch code doesn't apply to additions and alterations, and the new stretch code does apply to those. So the scope of the new stretch code is more comprehensive. Once you go to the next slide. If you look at the stretch code, it's it's pretty comprehensive, but if you pulled out the key details that really matter in terms of performance of the building, what you'll find are these themes right here on the left, that the stretch code is targeting having a building that has much better quality envelope that is air leakage tested. So you can rely on the envelope performance. There is much more comprehensive, and the scope has expanded significantly for mandatory ventilation energy recovery. And there is now all sorts of new language related to thermal bridges. All three of those things, when you combine them together at the right levels, they really deliver better buildings. So instead of having a building that has an envelope that you can't really count on, and that you have to have lots of HVAC systems to forgive all sins, you have a building that has an envelope that you can count on, and it means that your HVAC systems can be simpler, less costly, and the result is a building that is more resilient and comfortable and easier to electrify. Why don't you go to the next slide? As I said, one of the changes is to move from a stretch code that is built on a relative performance, percent improvement, to a stretch code that makes it mandatory that you show that your heating and cooling limits are below certain thresholds. So these are those thresholds here. It's called the TEDI limits. So the TEDI stands for the thermal energy demand intensity. So you'll see that there's a certain level of heating limit there. The range depends on the size of your building, and there's certain levels of cooling limits. Now we've designed this so that the design community that's used to the current stretch code can continue to use the same modeling tools that they've been using for decades. So it's not necessary for the design community to go out and learn new modeling tools or obtain new things. They can use the kind of tools that they're used to using. It's just that they're extracting different results from those same tools to show compliance. Would you go to the next slide? So another change, as I mentioned, is that the stretch code now does apply to additions and alterations. So let me just walk through each of these rows one by one. So this is again for a commercial building, if your addition is small, so it's under 20,000 square feet, and it's also less than doubling the size of the building, then the way that you show compliance with the stretch code is you follow stretch code prescriptively. That means that you don't have to do the modeling and such. If your addition is larger than that, for a commercial building, you treat the addition like new construction. So you would have to show with modeling, et cetera, that you're meeting those TEDI limits. If your project is just making alterations, then you simply have to make the altered portions of the building follow the stretch code prescriptively. And you don't have to change anything anywhere in the building that you're not planning to alter. So you don't have to sort of chase out things. You only have to update what you're altering. Now, if your project is actually changing the use of the building, so if you have a church that you're now changing to multifamily, that's actually fairly common. That's a change of use, in which case then you need to follow the stretch code prescriptively for all elements, and you would have to potentially chase down parts of the building that you weren't otherwise planning to alter. That last thing is something that's actually been in the code for many decades. I think it's been sort of maybe not paid attention to. So that's not actually a Massachusetts thing. That's something that's always been in the model code relative to this change of use. Next slide. We have a number of other elements. I just wanted to highlight them here quickly. That we have had an envelope backstop in our commercial code for about 4 years, which I think has been pretty successful. So we've given that some additional stringency. We do have some elements of mandatory electrification of space heating in the regular stretch code, depending upon some design choices that the building makes. We have some requirements for EV-ready parking. We also have some language on how you treat tenant spaces when they're when the tenant spaces are being built out for the first time within a newly built core and shell building. And then we also have language to better deal with mixed use buildings. So if you have a building that is you retail and commercial in the first story, and then it's all multifamily above, how do you treat those? The way that we now explicitly treat that is that each of those uses are treated as their own individual compliance methods according to those particular building uses. Next slide. So we found, we did an extensive study to look at the way our proposed stretch code compares to the current stretch code. So this was a team led by Stephen Werner's associates with BR Happold, BR+A, New Buildings Institute, and everything was cost estimated by Consigli Construction. For those that maybe are familiar with commercial construction, you should be familiar with these team members, and I'm sure you're familiar with Consigli. They built probably billions of square feet in the New England area, so they're very experienced at cost estimating. So this team put together designs for buildings that meet the current stretch code, and then design for a version that meets the proposed stretch code that's going into effect. And then each of those were priced. And what we found was that the proposed stretch code has a lower life cycle cost in all cases. So it is moving to a code that is more cost effective than what we have now. So in general, we found it's much more cost effective to improve envelope and count on that envelope performance, and then to use that as a way to reduce HVAC systems. We did find that for some building types that the first cost actually is smaller than under the current code. And that happens in some building types because once the envelope gets to a certain level of performance, you don't need to have such extensive HVAC to kind of forgive all envelope sins. So it allows you to be more lean in your choice of HVAC systems, and that saves money even from day one. Next slide. One of the key statistics here I just wanted to present was for schools. As your municipality is considering whether to adopt the stretch code, if you're currently a base code, and if you want to understand where you might stand, relative to the stretch code that will go into effect in July. So for a primary school, if you go with the current stretch code compared to the future stretch code, the first cost increases between 1% and 3%, and the life cycle cost of that primary school goes down between 1% and 2%. And for a secondary school, it's you can see it's actually a little bit more cost effective. You find that with larger buildings, the cost effectiveness becomes better and better. And that has to do with the massing of the building and the ability of the design engineers to take advantage of the size and massing of buildings, and with the better envelope you can count on. So in this case, the first cost is goes up by somewhere between almost negligible to a little under 1%. And then again, the life cycle cost, as I said, is always better, somewhere between 2% and about 3% improved life cycle cost. Next slide. Joanne, I wasn't sure if you were taking this part or not.
Yep.
Why don't we see what the next slide shows?
Yep. No, I think this is, there we go. Sorry about that. My computer is not behaving. There we go. I can take the next few slides.
Okay.
So I know a lot of folks on this webinar are very interested in specialized code. So now we're going to address some of that. So it's important for folks to realize that the specialized code is on top of the stretch code. So everything of the stretch code is part of the specialized code. And what the specialized code does for low-rise residential, and again, this is everything under 4 stories, it has the HERS ratings of 42 and 45 now versus in July of 2024, when it becomes effective under the stretch code. For new homes that are over 4,000 square feet, it requires an all-electric or a zero-energy pathway. The provisions for alterations and additions are same as they are under the stretch code. Another way to look at it, here's that fun chart. And again, it highlights for residents the HERS scores of 42 and 45. If you're building a house that's over 4,000 square feet, it's required to either meet a HERS 0 or have solar PV, unless the home is shaded. So again, it's really highlighting those larger homes to make them as efficient as possible. Here's again another way to look at it. And then under multifamily, we haven't talked too much about it because multifamily that's over 4 stories does fall under the commercial code. But Paul, since this has to do with passive house, I may just pass this back to you because you're a little more conversant in these things.
Yeah. There's a lot of information on the slides. Let me just distill it.
Yeah.
When your city or town adopts the specialized stretch code, what you're going to get with that is you're going to get mandatory passive house for all residential that's over 12,000 square feet and 6 stories or less, basically starting right away. That's starting this summer. And then starting next summer, January, I think that's supposed to say July 2024, Joanne. That would be required for all residential over 12,000 square feet. So just distilling a lot of detail down to a very simple message. When you choose specialized code in your city and town, all residential over 12,000 square feet, 6 stories or less, mandatory passive house. And then starting a year later, all residential, no matter what number of floors, that's over 12,000 square feet, mandatory passive house. So we're pretty excited about that. We're the first state, I think, in the US to have any sort of mandatory passive house in the code. So there you go, cities and towns. That's what makes the specialized so special, I think. Why don't you go to the next slide? So I can take this one. The other big difference with passive house or with the specialized code is that for commercial buildings which are not residential, you'll have 2 choices. You'll be able to be all electric, or you'll be able to put in mixed fuel, which would be a mix of electric and gas. So if you're all electric, then you're basically done. So this really is incentivizing builders to stay off gas and be all electric. If the builder chooses to be a mixed fuel with gas and electric, then they have to do 2 things. They have to put solar on the roof wherever it will fit and is not shaded. That's mandatory. And they'll have to bring electric service so that everything's electrification ready to all of the appliances that are gas. So again, this is what makes the specialized code special. So for commercial buildings that are in your city and town, if you adopt the specialized code, it means that the builder has to either be all electric, or if they choose to still have gas in it, then they need to put solar on the roof and they need to bring electric service to those appliances. So it really disincentivize anyone continuing to use gas in new construction. Would you go to the next slide? This is just to illustrate that's kind of redundant to what we've been saying. When you choose the specialized code, you get everything that's in the regular stretch code, plus this, what I just explained about either being all electric or being mixed fuel. I want you to go to the next slide. And
right.
I'll give this back to you, Joanne. This is your warrant article thing.
I'll take the process. Thank you, Paul. First of all, I don't think we explicitly said this, but if you're currently a stretch code community, you don't need to do anything. The stretch code automatically updates as we go along, so you don't need to vote on it again, assuming you want to stay to be a stretch code community and be a green community. Communities wishing to adopt a specialized code, the process is very similar to how you adopted the stretch code. If you're a town, you need to pass a warrant article at town meeting. We highly encourage it to be in a bylaw form, and we have model language on our website. If you're a city or a town council government, it's that body that will vote on that. Again, we highly encourage to have an effective date of either January 1st or July 1st. That tends to be when code officials and builders and others look to see code changes. And again, we highly recommend that you have 6 to 12 months after adoption for it to become effective. Communities that are looking to have votes this spring, please contact your Green Communities Regional Coordinator. We can schedule a public information session to go over all this and come to your town or through virtually to answer any questions, just to make sure people know what they're voting on. All right, and then that is our last slide. Here's a bunch of links to stay in touch with us. We have a stretch code email list. You can sign up for that. We've got, as Paul mentioned, detailed case studies and technical information on our website. We have got a coordinator, Green Community Coordinator information. And then we have upcoming trainings that are provided through the Mass Save program for code officials as well as for contractors. And that's it. We're done.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanne and Paul. I'm going to bring Julie and myself back up online as well. We have been collecting a few questions from the audience as we've gone through, so we have time for maybe a couple questions before we close out. I do think that this list of resources is really helpful, and we will be sure to share all of the links as follow-up. Let's see. One of the questions from the residential side is how can municipalities download HERS data specific to their community?
Download it from where?
I think that came with some of the HERS data that you were showing in terms of like average Massachusetts HERS ratings.
Oh, I believe we get those HERS ratings from ResNet, which is the entity that the HERS raters report the HERS ratings to. I don't think there's a way for folks to access that specifically, but your building official should have the HERS rating data if you're a stretch code community.
Great. That is good to know. And then there are a couple other HERS ratings. Oh,
I
sorry,
don't know if that data is at the level of granularity of by town. We have to take a look at that to see. It may be by town or zip code. If it is, we can bifurcate that and share what that shows. But it might be only at the level of by state.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd have to go back and check.
That would be great. I think there are a few municipalities who are interested in that. Let's see, on the residential side, there's another couple questions about just how additions and alterations are considered significant, and then If an addition or alteration is covered by the new stretch code, must the whole building comply with the code?
That's the $100,000 question. So there are specific, let's see if I could pull it up quickly.
And we should answer this question like, here's the answer for residential and here's the answer
Yeah.
for.
Yeah,
commercial. So it's
I
two
remember you
parts.
mentioned it on commercial side. Yeah.
Yeah. So additions have to be either doubling, 100% doubling the conditioned floor space. That's what CFA stands for, or 1,000 square feet. That's an addition. Alteration has to be over 1,000 square feet and 50% of the floor area. So using we recently did some renovations in my house. We took a wall down. We're 1,700 square feet, but the affected area was like 300 square feet. So our kitchen project would not trigger a HERS rating. This is more for, really triggering like gut renovations or huge changes in the structure or a huge addition.
Yeah, these levels here of the 1,000 square feet, et cetera. These are designed to catch the builders that, buy an old Cape in Winchester, and then they demolish all but one little part of the thing, and they build basically a whole new house and declare that that's a alteration because they didn't demolish the basement or something. So this is meant to capture those kind of flipping builders that are trying to basically pass off what is really new construction as alterations or additions. So this doesn't apply to someone that's, fixing their kitchen, or doing like a small little bump out on the side of their house. They would be very unlikely to trigger these levels.
Great. So we have a ton of.
So on the commercial side, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can finish up on the commercial side and then I'll switch us over.
On the commercial side, it's in a way, it's a bit simpler. So if you're and in addition to anything that's ground up new construction. So if you have an existing building and you're putting an addition on it, it's ground up new construction. The question is it doubling the size of the existing building, or is it more than 20,000 square feet? If it's neither of those things, then it's follow prescriptive code for the addition, and there's nothing you need to do for the existing building. And then if it's a large addition, it's the same rules. You do have to treat the addition like new construction, but you don't have to go back and change anything about the existing building. If you're altering the existing building, then you only need to change the things that you're actually altering without having to chase things down. And then if you're changing its use, then you do have to treat the entire project as new construction.
Right. And I guess a follow-up question. So the HERS rating, Joanne, and your example of the alteration or the renovated space, the HERS rating would be for just that space or for the whole building?
So if it's an addition, most likely just for the new space, because you can separate that part out, if you will. If it's an alteration, then it's going to be for the whole building. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't really calculate it separate from the building itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, there's one important nuance there. This is where residential is a little different. You can't really do a HERS rating for someone that doesn't have a full dwelling unit separate. So if your addition is like literally an in-law apartment that has its own kitchen, that has its own bedrooms, then you can treat the addition standalone and just get a HERS rating on the addition. If your addition is this huge addition that triggers these 1,000 square feet, et cetera, then it is actually the case, and it's just, you know, space without being its own in-law apartment. It does actually trigger the whole building requiring to meet these HERS additions, because you can't get a HERS rating on just, you know, a living room or, you know, a man cave.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we don't have too much more time for questions, although we do have a lot that came in to the chat. So I think one of our plans is to compile the questions. And then I know DOER will be also putting out a frequently asked questions guide soon. And one of, I don't know, Joanne, since your slides are still up, if you just want to go to your resource page.
Yep.
There's a lot of questions, I think, both about training, inspectional services departments, and who's doing the trainings, when is that happening? So maybe we could just go through. So there are DOER emails. You can also email directly to DOER. I think it's called stretch code at
mass.gov.
Yeah, if you have specific code questions, particularly if you have these like really technical questions that you're trying to get an answer to. And then there are also energy code trainings that are happening through Mass Save. And then additionally through MAPC, we have a couple webinars coming up. So we have a Codes for Climate session number 2, which is more on Mass Save electrification incentives. That's going to be on March 1st. And then on March 7th, we have a webinar on healthy homes, tackling the housing and climate crisis. And then also, I'll just put them all in there, a couple other webinars. And in terms of policy adoption questions, so if you're a municipality, whether you're staff or committee or board looking to adopt the specialized code, particularly as Joanne said, for spring meeting or in the near future, please reach out to your Green Communities regional coordinator. They're going to be the best person, I think, to work with and walk through those specific adoption questions and things like how to communicate with municipalities when they might be nervous about the stretch code or just stretch code basics, things like that. And yeah, some of my colleagues are putting some of the webinars in the chat as well. So, and then as always, feel free to reach out to MAPC, our clean energy at mapc.org. If you're within, particularly if you're within our region and you want to talk with us as well. And with that,
Sasha, there was
yeah.
one request.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Joanne or Paul, if you wouldn't mind, can you post in the chat the email that people can write to if they have specific code questions again? And possibly just a general link to how they can contact their Green Communities coordinator if they're thinking about code adoption. It sounds like some folks are on pretty tight timelines with their town meeting coming and would like to be in touch. Or there it is on the slide as well. Great. And then we did put in the chat the link to our next webinar on massive electrification incentives that we hope you can join. The idea there is to provide an update on how the Mass Save program has shifted in support of these new codes to help electrify new and renovated buildings. So we hope you can join us there. And then we've had a few questions about the slides and when they'll be online, and we'll try to do that as soon as possible. We'll aim for this week and to email all the attendees so you also have a link to them, or send them as an attachment if we're a little delayed in getting them up on our website.
Yes, and to close out, thank you to Paul and Joanne for presenting all of this information, and we look forward to working with DOER and all of you as we embark on the specialized codes. And
Will
Joanne and Paul.
Will MAPC be able to? I'm sorry. Will MAPC be able to send us all of the questions that came in through the chat?
Yeah, compiling them.
Is there? Yeah, I we really didn't get a chance to scratch the surface of many of them. So if you can send them to us, I think we should answer them all individually. And then we can share with the entire group all of those questions and answers. I think that would be good. And then for those that have project-specific questions, don't hesitate to email me and we can set up a phone call.
Great. Thank you all. And I'm gonna,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.